Hello, and welcome back to Mostly Movies, where we mostly discuss movies, mostly. Today we're talking about the reissue in theaters of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Well, I had never seen this one on the big screen. This was a movie that I did not grow up with, although I grew up with a lot of Star Trek movies and shows. This one is one that we tried to rent from the library, but it was always kind of boring. It was always kind of slow. So we would just watch Wrath of Khan for like the 20th time or Star Trek Search for Spock for the 30th time. Because those just played better and they just had better structure. They were more like movies, whereas the motion picture felt like a big episode and not an episode that, you know, is one of the best ones. I grew up watching the original series in the mid 80s, late at night on Channel 11. Um, we started taping some of them because I learned how to program the VCR, and I would tape them late at night and then watch them the next day after school. And a lot of Star Trek was hard to understand as a young kid, but I always responded to the color, to the sound, the music, the designs, all those things were very, very interesting, and it kind of helped me be able to follow the story without knowing what really was going on. Um, so I didn't see this movie, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, until 2001 when it first came out on DVD. So it was pretty late in the game. And I watched it and I appreciated some of it, and I liked the music by Jerry Goldsmith. But I just felt the film was too long. It was trying too much to be 2001 with these big, long shots with the music, and it takes forever for a shuttlecraft to reach the Enterprise. And I just felt that there could have been a good movie in here, a better movie, if they just trimmed some scenes down, if they really put back the humor that we had in Star Trek and the color and the life. This seemed like a very drab, very drawn out and boring version of Star Trek. And it was nice to see it on the big screen, and it's nice to see it in a theater. And the remastering job they did was great. The remastering of the original negative and remastering of the effects. But ultimately, you're left with a very boring, very dull Star Trek movie. There are great ideas in this film, especially towards the end. I would say the last 40 minutes of this movie, or hour maybe, is very impressive. But leading up to that, there didn't seem to be really a lot of chemistry with the new characters. There didn't seem to be a lot of things that were that interesting in this movie. Almost the whole movie takes place on the Enterprise bridge. Like they needed to break it up a little bit more and maybe have some scenes in other locations or other moments throughout the film. Um, your side characters like Scotty, Uhura, Chekhov, Sulu pretty much had nothing to do in this film. Um, Spock had a little bit to do. Kirk was hard to like in this movie because he's a bit of a jerk in this film. So you don't really sympathize with him. Whereas, like, you watch Star Trek 2, you immediately sympathize with Kirk and what he's going through. So overall, I would say it's worth seeing if you're like a mega Star Trek fan, especially of the old Star Trek. Star Trek, the new Trek, we don't really talk about much. But if you're an old fan of the old stuff, it's worth checking out in the theater. Make sure you tell your manager to play it loud. They didn't play it loud where I saw it, and I was a little bit annoyed at that because this is a movie I really wanted to hear. I really wanted to hear Jerry's music played loud. But overall, it's worth seeing if you're a Star Trek fan. If you're not a Star Trek fan, I would not go see this movie or watch it on Paramount Plus. But if you are a fan of Star Trek, even if you like the new stuff, which I'm not into, it might be a good idea to check this movie out just to see their first attempt at trying to make a movie, trying to compete with Star Wars. Because what happened was this was just supposed to be a TV series, Star Trek Phase 2. Star Wars had come out, and Paramount decided, why don't we start making Star Trek movies? Because that seems to be the way this is all going. And, Star Trek The Motion Picture is not a great movie, but it did pretty good at the box office. I think a lot of that was even though it's kind of a dull movie, the fans were just coming back again and again and again to see it. But that gave us Star Trek 2. And Star Trek 2 was very successful with critics and fans. Star Trek 3 was very successful. With critics, it was kind of mixed, and audiences. But it all led to like Star Trek 4, and then the Next Generation TV series was basically produced off of that Star Trek movie money. And even Next Generation was a little bumpy at the beginning, but it got great. That's usually what happened with the old Star Trek. Even if there was some problems at the beginning, it did eventually hit its stride and become something great. Deep Space Nine as well. Except for the original series. The original series is the one series of Star Trek, the one anything of Star Trek that was great right out of the gates. And unfortunately, it fell off a little bit in season 2 and fell off a lot in season 3. But that first season of Star Trek, even if you're not a fan, you can watch that first season of Star Trek and appreciate the ideas. Everything about that first season is great. So definitely check it out. It's also streaming on Paramount Plus, or if you want to pick up the Blu-ray, which I like to do because the Blu-ray has both versions, the original and the remastered. The remastered version of the original series is much better, but I do like having the original versions too. Okay, so a quick run through of Star Trek. The motion picture, I just basically will give it metal horns up, barely. Because there are certain things in it that I do like, especially the ending, which I thought was very inspired. And of course, a giant metal horns up for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. A mild metal horns up for Star Trek IV, which is probably the least of the good ones. It's still good, but as far as the good Star Trek movies go, it's kind of not the best of the good ones. Star Trek V gets metal horns down. Not really a good film, although it has great music by Jerry Goldsmith. And as a Star Trek fan, there are things in it that I really love, but there's also things that frustrate me and upset me to no end. Huge metal horns up for Star Trek VI, The Apology. No, The Undiscovered Country, which was the original title of Star Trek II, but they think they needed something stronger, so they changed it to The Vengeance of Khan, which they had to change because Return of the Jedi was once called Revenge of the Jedi, and then it changed back to Return of the Jedi, in which case they changed their movie to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Whoa. But Star Trek VI is a great film. It's an allegory about the fall of the Soviet Union with the Klingon Empire, and that film, I think what was great about Star Trek VI is it had a lot of the humor but it had the 23rd century sci-fi action of a great Star Trek movie too. Especially the space battle at the end was particularly amazing. That screening was great. The crowd was insane on opening night. Next Generation movies are their own thing. And the only one really worth watching is First Contact. I'm sorry for all the coughing. I have a slight allergy troubles this week. And it's very warm in the library tonight. So I might do a video soon on summer reading, which I don't have a stack of books, because then when you have a stack of books, you never end up reading any of them. So what I do is I just have been randomly picking out a book and that I haven't read before, and I'm trying to read it for the summer. And I started with The Once and Future King by T.H. White. I thought it was something else White, but T.H. White. Fantastic book so far. I've read about 100 pages. It's 600, so it's going to take me a while between work and responsibilities and school to finish this book. But hope to give you a report on it real soon once it's finished. Okay, everybody, we have more videos coming up ahead with some of the summer releases. So stay tuned to the channel.